7 minutes. That's how long Jessica Heeringa had left in her shift before she could go home. She never made it. A silver van was waiting in the parking lot. A man with handcuffs, chains, and a gun. By the time the next customer arrived, Jessica was gone. Her purse on the counter. Her car in the lot. $400 untouched. Everything was there. Except her. Her body has never been found. But what police discovered about those 7 minutes is worse than you can imagine. Jessica Lynn Heeringa was born on November 2, 1987, in Norton Shores, Michigan, a quiet suburb on the shores of Lake Michigan, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. She was the youngest child, born to parents Shelley and George Heeringa. Her childhood was normal, filled with small-town simplicity. She loved animals. She dreamed of becoming a veterinarian one day. She had that kind of warmth that made people feel comfortable around her, an easy smile, quick to laugh, always the first to help someone in need. But life had other plans. At 17, Jessica became pregnant. It wasn't what she'd planned, but she didn't run from it. On May 2, 2009, she gave birth to a baby boy named Dakota. And from that moment, everything changed. Jessica poured everything she had into being a mother. Dakota became her world. She'd work any job, any hours, to provide for him. She didn't have the luxury of chasing dreams anymore. She had bills, diapers, daycare costs, a son who depended on her completely. By 2013, Jessica was 25 years old and working at an Exxon gas station on Airline Highway in Norton Shores. It wasn't glamorous. The pay was barely above minimum wage. But it was close to home, and the hours, though often late, allowed her to spend time with Dakota during the day. Her co-workers liked her. She was reliable, friendly, always punctual. She'd show up for shifts with stories about Dakota, how he loved dinosaurs, how he'd made her laugh that morning, how fast he was growing. She was also in a relationship with a man named Dakota Quail-Dyer. They weren't perfect, relationships at 25 rarely are, but they were trying. Building something. Figuring it out together. Jessica had plans. Not big, extravagant plans, but the kind of plans that matter. She wanted to get a better job eventually. Maybe go back to school. Give Dakota a good life. Be there for his first day of kindergarten, his baseball games, his graduation. Simple dreams. Normal dreams. But on April 26, 2013, all of those dreams would be ripped away, because that night, Jessica was scheduled to close the gas station alone. Her shift started at 4 p.m. and ended at 11 p.m. 7 hours. Then home. She called her boyfriend around 10:45 p.m., just like she always did when her shift was almost over. They talked for a few minutes. Nothing important. Just the kind of call couples make, checking in, saying goodnight, making plans for the next day. "I'll be home soon," she told him. Those would be the last words he'd ever hear her say. At approximately 11 p.m., a customer pulled into the Exxon station. He needed air in his tires. He walked into the store. It was empty. The lights were on. The register was untouched. Music played softly from the radio. But Jessica was gone. He called out. No answer. He checked the bathroom. Empty. He walked outside, looked around the property. Her car was still parked in the lot. Her purse was inside the store, sitting on the counter. Her cell phone. Her cigarettes. Everything. But Jessica vanished. At 11:07 p.m., the customer called 911. "There's nobody here," he told the dispatcher, his voice uncertain. "The gas station's just empty." The girl who was working is gone. When police arrived minutes later, they found exactly what the customer described. He walked outside, looked around the property. Her car was still parked in the lot. Her purse was inside the store, sitting on the counter. Her cell phone. Her cigarettes. Everything. But Jessica vanished. At 11:07 p.m., the customer called 911. "There's nobody here," he told the dispatcher, his voice uncertain. "The gas station's just empty. The girl who was working is gone." When police arrived minutes later, they found exactly what the customer described. Let's go back to that night. April 26, 2013. Because understanding what happened requires understanding the timeline, minute by minute. Jessica Heeringa clocked in for her shift at 4 p.m. It was a typical Friday. Spring in Michigan, still chilly, but the worst of winter was over. The gas station was busy during the early evening. Commuters stopping for gas. Kids buying snacks. The usual flow. By 9 p.m., things had quieted down. Norton Shores isn't a big city. After dark, foot traffic drops. The Exxon station sits on Airline Highway, a stretch of road lined with strip malls and chain restaurants. Not isolated, but not bustling either. Jessica was alone. The gas station didn't staff 2 people for the closing shift, a decision that, in hindsight, would haunt everyone involved. Around 10 p.m., a few more customers trickled in. Security footage would later show Jessica behind the counter, ringing up purchases, chatting briefly, doing her job. She seemed normal. Calm. No signs of distress. At 10:45 p.m., she called her boyfriend. A routine call. They talked about nothing important. She told him she'd be home soon. They'd see each other tomorrow. Normal couple talk. She hung up. 15 minutes until closing. What happened in those final 15 minutes has been pieced together through witness statements, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence. But gaps remain. Moments lost to time and terror. At approximately 10:52 p.m., a silver minivan pulled into the parking lot. This wasn't unusual. Late-night customers were common. But this van didn't pull up to the pumps. It parked off to the side, near the air pump station. Surveillance footage shows a figure exit the van and approach the store. The footage is grainy, shot from a distance, but you can make out a person average height, wearing dark clothing walking toward the entrance. And then the footage shows something chilling. The person doesn't go inside. They linger near the door, waiting. At approximately 10:55 p.m., another customer pulls into the station. He pumps gas, pays at the pump, and drives away. He later tells police he saw Jessica inside, behind the counter. She was fine. Alone, but fine. The silver minivan is still there. Between 10:55 p.m. and 11:07 p.m., something happened. Because when the next customer arrives at 11:07 p.m., the man who needs air for his tires, Jessica, is gone. Police believe the abduction happened in a 7-minute window. 7 minutes. That's how long it took for a 25-year-old mother to vanish from her workplace. Here's what investigators believe occurred. Jessica was preparing to close the store. Counting the register, maybe. Cleaning up. Getting ready to lock the doors and go home. A man, later identified as Jeffrey Willis, entered the gas station. He may have pretended to be a customer. Or he may have simply walked in with a weapon already drawn. Jessica was forced outside. Police believe he used a gun, a theory supported by the laser sight parts found near the side door. He may have told her to walk calmly, quietly, to avoid a scene. There was a brief struggle. Blood droplets suggest she was hit or fell. But there was no time for screaming, no time for calling for help. Within minutes, maybe less, she was in the silver minivan. And then she was gone. The entire abduction likely lasted 3 to 5 minutes. By the time the 11:07 p.m. customer arrived, Jessica Heeringa was already miles away, bound and helpless, being driven to a place so evil that even hardened detectives would struggle to describe it later. A basement. In a house on Bailey Street, where a monster had built his torture sanctuary. And where Jessica Lynn Heeringa would take her final breaths. The 911 call came in at 11:08 p.m. "There's nobody at the gas station," the caller said, his voice confused more than panicked. "The girl who was working, she's just gone." Norton Shores police arrived within minutes. At first, they weren't sure what they were dealing with. An employee walking off the job? Unlikely, given her purse and car were still there. A medical emergency? Possible, but there was no sign of collapse, no ambulance call. But then they found the blood. And the gun parts. And suddenly, this went from a mystery to a crime scene. Detective sergeants began interviewing the last known customers. Reviewing security footage. Searching the area. The footage showed the silver minivan, parked off to the side. A figure approaching the store. But the angle was bad. The lighting worse. They couldn't make out a face. Couldn't read a license plate clearly. But they had a vehicle description. Silver minivan. Possibly a Dodge or Chrysler. 2000s model. Police issued a statement to the press the next morning. Jessica Heeringa, 25, missing. Last seen at the Exxon station on Airline Highway. Possible abduction. If you saw anything at all, please call. The community erupted. Norton Shores is a tight-knit place. 15,000 people. The kind of town where crime like this doesn't happen. Where young mothers don't just vanish from their workplace. Volunteers flooded in. Search parties formed. Jessica's family, her mother Shelley, her father, her sister, stood in front of news cameras, pleading for information. "Please," Shelley Heeringa begged, tears streaming down her face. "If you have my daughter, just bring her home. She has a little boy who needs her. Please." Tips poured in. Dozens. Then hundreds. Police followed every lead. A silver van spotted near the highway? Investigated. A woman matching Jessica's description seen at a rest stop? Checked. Anonymous tips about suspicious men in the area? All pursued. But nothing led anywhere. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Jessica's face was everywhere. Billboards. Missing person flyers. Local news. National news. Her story spread across Michigan and beyond. But there were no breaks. No arrests. No body. The case went cold. By 2014, police had exhausted most leads. They still believed Jessica had been abducted, the evidence supported that, but without a suspect, without a body, there was nowhere to go. Jessica's mother refused to give up. She organized annual searches. She kept Jessica's name in the media. She worked with advocacy groups for missing persons. "I will never stop looking for her," Shelley said in one interview. "Never. Not until I bring my daughter home." But privately, investigators feared the worst. Statistically, abduction victims who aren't found within the first 48 hours are rarely found alive. And Jessica had been missing for over a year. Still, the case haunted the detectives assigned to it. because they knew deep in their guts that whoever took Jessica had done this before, and might do it again. They were right. Because on June 29, 2014, just over a year after Jessica vanished, another young woman was gunned down in the same county. Her name was Rebecca Bletch. Rebecca Bletch was 36 years old. A wife. A mother. A woman who loved to jog. On the evening of June 29, 2014, she went for a run on a rural road in Dalton Township, just north of Norton Shores. It was a route she'd taken many times before. Quiet. Peaceful. Safe. At approximately 6:30 p.m., a passing motorist found Rebecca lying on the side of the road. She'd been shot in the head. Execution style. No robbery. No sexual assault. Just murder. Police had no motive. No witnesses. No suspects, but the location, just miles from where Jessica Heeringa had vanished, set off alarm bells. Could the two cases be connected? Investigators didn't know, but they couldn't ignore the possibility. For 2 more years, both cases remained unsolved. Jessica still missing. Rebecca's killer still at large. And then, on April 16, 2016, something happened that would finally break everything wide open. A 16-year-old girl was walking home from a friend's house in Musken, Michigan. It was evening, but still light out. She was on the phone with her boyfriend, chatting casually, when a silver minivan pulled up beside her. The driver, a middle-aged man, rolled down his window and asked for directions. She approached the van to help. And that's when he pulled out a gun. "Get in," he ordered. The girl froze. Her boyfriend, still on the phone, heard everything. "What's going on?" he yelled through the speaker. "What's happening?" The girl made a split-second decision. She ran. The man jumped out of the van and chased her, gun in hand. But she was fast. And she was screaming. Neighbors came outside. The man panicked and fled back to his van, speeding away. The girl collapsed on a nearby lawn, sobbing. But she was alive. And she'd memorized the license plate. Police traced the plate to a man named Jeffrey Thomas Willis. 47 years old. Lived in Musken County. Owned a silver 2006 Dodge Grand Caravan. The same description as the van seen at the gas station the night Jessica vanished. Detectives immediately obtained a search warrant. On May 17, 2016, they raided Jeffrey Willis's home and vehicle. What they found was the stuff of nightmares. Inside the van, police discovered what they called a murder and rape kit. Handcuffs. Chains. Rope. Syringes. Duct tape. A ball gag. Zip ties. Sex toys. A loaded .22 caliber handgun. But that wasn't all. When they searched Willis's computers, they found over 10,000 videos. Thousands of images. All of them depicting rape, torture, and murder. And in his files, they found folders labeled VICS, short for victims. One folder was labeled JLH. Jessica Lynn Heeringa. Inside that folder were photos. Maps. Surveillance notes. It was clear Willis had been stalking Jessica for weeks, maybe months, before he abducted her. But the most chilling detail? His computer password, J427L13H13. Police deciphered it. J equals Jessica. The 27th of April, 13 equals April 27th, 2013, the day after Jessica vanished. H13 equals Heeringa 2013. He'd turned her abduction into his password. A trophy. A sick reminder. Jeffrey Willis was arrested and charged with Jessica's kidnapping and murder. But police still had one massive problem. They didn't have a body. And without a body, proving murder would be difficult. So they kept digging. And what they uncovered would reveal the true depth of Jeffrey Willis's evil. For 2 more years, both cases remained unsolved. Jessica still missing. Rebecca's killer still at large. The families were losing hope. The detectives were out of leads. But then, on April 16, 2016, something happened that would crack both cases wide open. A 16-year-old girl. Walking home. A silver van pulls up beside her. She had no idea she was about to come face to face with a serial killer. What happened next would save her life, and reveal the monster who took Jessica. Jeffrey Thomas Willis was born in 1969. He grew up in Muscatine County, Michigan. On the surface, he seemed ordinary. Quiet. Kept to himself. He worked in construction. Had a few friends. No major criminal record, just a few minor offenses. Nothing that would raise red flags. But beneath that ordinary exterior was something dark. Something twisted. Willis had an obsession with power, control, and violence. Specifically, violence against women. Police discovered that Willis spent hours every day watching violent pornography, much of it depicting abduction, rape, and murder. He wasn't just watching. He was studying, learning, planning. He frequented the Exxon station where Jessica worked. Co-workers later recalled seeing him there often. Always alone. Always watching. He gave me the creeps, one co-worker said in an interview. He'd just stand there, staring. Never said much. Just watching. But Jessica had been polite to him, as she was to all customers. She didn't know she was being hunted. On April 26, 2013, Willis decided to act. He drove to the gas station in his silver minivan. He waited until Jessica was alone. And then he took her. But where did he take her? That question led police to a house on Bailey Street in Muscatine, a house that had belonged to Willis's deceased grandfather. Willis had a key, and he'd been using the house for years. When police searched the property, they found something that made even seasoned investigators feel sick. The basement. It was padlocked, sealed off from the rest of the house. And inside, police found what they would later describe as a torture sanctuary. The walls were lined with plastic sheeting. There were bleach bottles everywhere used to destroy DNA evidence. Chains bolted to the walls. A filthy mattress on the floor. Scattered items that suggested someone had been held there against their will. This was where Jeffrey Willis brought his victims. And this was where Jessica Heeringa died. But police had more than just the basement. They had a witness. Jeffrey Willis's cousin, Kevin Bloom. But the evidence in the van was just the beginning. When detectives searched his computers, what they found made even seasoned investigators physically sick. 10,000 videos. Torture. Rape. Murder. And buried in his files, they found folders labeled VICS. Victims. Plural. One folder was marked JLH. Jessica Lynn Heeringa. But it wasn't the computer files that would haunt detectives the most. It was what Jeffrey Willis had built in his dead grandfather's house. A room that police would later describe as a torture sanctuary. And the testimony of one man who saw what happened there would reveal the full horror of Jessica's final moments. Kevin Bloom didn't want to be involved. He didn't want to testify. But police had evidence that he'd been at the Bailey Street house shortly after Jessica's abduction. And under pressure, Kevin finally broke. In court, during Jeffrey Willis's trial, Kevin Bloom took the stand. And what he said would haunt everyone in that courtroom. Kevin testified that on April 27, 2013, the day after Jessica vanished, his cousin Jeffrey called him and asked him to come to the Bailey Street house. Kevin arrived. Jeffrey led him to the basement, and there, on the floor, was a woman's body. She was naked, tied up. There was a wound on her head. Her eyes were closed. "She's dead," Jeffrey told him calmly. Kevin stood there, frozen, staring at the woman on the floor. He didn't know who she was at the time. He didn't know her name. But he knew what he was looking at. A victim. A murder victim. "Help me get rid of her," Jeffrey said, but Kevin panicked. He refused. He left the house and tried to block it out. For 3 years, Kevin Bloom kept that secret. He didn't go to the police. He didn't tell anyone. He tried to pretend it hadn't happened. But when Jeffrey was finally arrested in 2016, Kevin knew he couldn't stay silent anymore. His testimony was devastating, because it confirmed what police had suspected all along. Jessica Heeringa had been taken to that basement. She'd been held there, tortured, assaulted, and then killed. But here's the part that still haunts investigators. Jeffrey Willis never told them where he buried her body. Even after his conviction, even facing life in prison, Willis refused to reveal where Jessica Heeringa is. Police believe she was buried somewhere in the Manistee National Forest, a sprawling, dense wilderness area about an hour north of Musken. Searchers have combed through sections of the forest using ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, everything. But the forest is massive. Over 540,000 acres. Finding a body buried somewhere in that expanse is nearly impossible. So Jessica remains missing. Her family still doesn't have closure. Her son, Dakota, grew up without his mother. And Jeffrey Willis? He sits in prison, holding on to his final act of cruelty, denying Jessica's family the chance to bring her home. Jeffrey Willis went to trial in May 2018. The evidence against him was overwhelming. The murder kit in his van, the computer files, the password, the cousin's testimony, ballistics linking his gun to Rebecca Bletcher's murder. On May 14, 2018, the jury found Jeffrey Thomas Willis guilty of first-degree murder in Jessica Heeringa's death. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In a separate trial, he was also convicted of murdering Rebecca Bletch and kidnapping the 16-year-old girl who escaped. 2 more life sentences. Jeffrey Willis will never walk free. But the victory felt hollow. Because Jessica's body has never been found. And without a body, there's no grave to visit. No place for her family to mourn. Jessica's mother, Shelley, has never stopped searching. She organizes annual searches in the Manistee National Forest. She works with volunteer groups. She holds out hope that one day, someone will find her daughter. "I need to bring her home," Shelley said in an interview after the trial. "She deserves a proper burial. Dakota deserves a place to visit his mom." Jessica's son, Dakota, is now a teenager. He was only 3 years old when his mother vanished. He doesn't remember much about her. But he knows her story. And he knows that somewhere, out there, his mother is still waiting to be found. As for Jeffrey Willis, he remains silent. He's given no interviews. made no confessions, shown no remorse. He is, in every sense, a monster. A predator who hunted women for sport. Who built a torture dungeon in his grandfather's basement. Who took pleasure in their suffering. And he got away with it for years. Until a 16-year-old girl ran. Jessica Heeringa was 25. A mother. Just trying to get home. She never made it. Her body has never been found. Jeffrey Willis had a folder labeled VICS. Victims. Plural. How many others were there? We'll never know. He sits in prison, holding his secrets. Evil doesn't announce itself. Jeffrey Willis looked ordinary. But women like Jessica became his prey. Remember Jessica. Remember that monsters are real. And they're always watching. If this story moved you, please subscribe. We cover true crime cases that deserve to be remembered. Jessica's family is still searching. Every share helps keep her case alive. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering Jessica. Stay safe.